Labdien, labrīt vai labvakar, lai kurā vietā un laikā klausies šo podkāstu. Man ir prieks, ka šie elektroni ir nonākuši līdz tavām ausīm. Šī epizode būs ļoti īpaša, bet pirms mēs turpinām, gribu atgādināt, ka apskatot uzlādēts veikalu, veikals.uzlādēts.lv, jūs varat iegūt vislabākās uzlādes stācijas par visizdevīgākajām cenām. Atgriežoties pie paša podkāsta, mums šoreiz ir īpašs viesis, tas ir Konrads Hanschmidts no Gridio, un viņi šobrīd ir izlaiduši beta versiju, lai varētu ļoti izdevīgi lādēt jūsu elektroauto. Cilvēki, kas nesaprot angļu valodu, man jūs drusku ir jāapbēdina, jo šī intervija notiks angliski. Hi, Konrad.
Hi, Carlis. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing fine. It's now thunderstorm outside, but since I'm inside, it doesn't matter. How are you?
Yeah, very good. Not far from you, but no thunderstorm yet, so it's not too bad. Getting into autumn mode already.
I saw the weather forecast is moving to your place. I didn't mention it in the intro, but you're from Estonia. Well, correct.
That's correct. That's correct.
Yeah. Tell us a bit about yourself, well, before we get into Gridio. But what are you? Where do you come from?
Yeah. I guess originally from Estonia, but I guess I've spent most of my career outside of Estonia in the Baltics. Initially, when carbon markets were supposed to be the big thing back in 2008, just as the global financial crisis happened, I was a carbon market consultant and trading analyst working with some electricity companies. And then most recently, before Gridio, I was actually at the world's largest mining company called BHP Billiton in Singapore, and looking at, I guess, two things. One was electric vehicles and their growth, to understand basically how much metals goes into electric vehicles, particularly copper. But the other thing that we were looking at was also Australian electricity markets, because Australia is a very interesting electricity market. So if you ever want to see what the future looks like, there's two places probably in the world in the sense of electricity. It's Australia and Hawaii. So both of them have got a really high amount of renewable energy available. Both of them are pretty adventurous with their energy policy and really pushing new technologies in. And in the case of Australia, for example, which doesn't have a lot of electric vehicles, but they have 70% of electricity coming from wind. So we were looking at how can we possibly trade and buy electricity in the cheapest and most sustainable way. And actually, at that point, I met my co-founder, Sandor Liive, who's the former CEO of Eesti Energia, the equivalent of Latvenergo in Latvia. And at that time, both of us, he had kind of just left his CEO position, and I'd kind of come across this distributed energy management, and then we both saw that there's actually a lot of possibility to solve the problem of renewable intermittency. What happens if the wind doesn't blow or the sun doesn't shine, but also use home energy assets. At that point, electric heaters, boilers, but even more so now, electric vehicles and their chargers to help balance the grid. And that's so in 2018, actually, we co-founded Gridio. And after a kind of a year and a half of R&D and research and building our technology, we actually went live for the first time in Finland at the beginning of 2020. And in Scandinavia, there's a lot of kind of electric heaters and boilers that we use to help balance the grid. But what became very clear to us, especially somewhere in the middle of last year, is that everybody's interested in electric vehicles and how to charge them. Either some people more cheaply, other people more sustainably, and with the growth, I guess the Baltics is lagging across all the three of us, but with Finland, Scandinavia, Norway, there's so many electric vehicles coming, and for us an electric vehicle is I didn't come up with that term, but it's like a Trojan horse. So if you buy one at your home, you really start caring about where do you get your electricity from, how do you start charging, and now we came up with our first kind of consumer-facing app as well, which we hadn't done before for Baltic and Scandinavian customers. And the aim for that is to really make electric vehicle smart charging using the best possible times and prices, really simple for end users.
Before we dig into that, I want you to explain to me in a simple way as possible about carbon market.
Carbon market. Basically, it's really simple. The government decides how much carbon can be emitted in the EU, actually on the EU level, which is somewhere around, I think, 2 billion tons, and then hands out permits to companies and saying, there you Latvian ergo, or actually, or sells them and says, look, you can only emit as many CO2 tons as you give me permits at the end of the year. And it's like a game of musical chairs, you know, that you play in kindergarten, that they always take one chair away and you have to find a seat. So every chair starts to cost a lot more money. And that's why we've seen, you know, even in all the electricity markets in our region, the price of carbon has shot up twofold in the past 2 years. And it's basically because the emissions are not falling as rapidly as there is demand to buy these permits, and everybody's rushing to get them. And that's also affecting electricity prices a lot.
Is that the reason why we have such higher electricity prices now? Or is there other reason for it?
So we did some analysis looking at the electricity prices in the region for the first 6 months. So we looked at 2021, 2020, and 2019. And one of the things that we concluded is that last year with the COVID lockdown was a complete anomaly, right? So the demand for electricity was so low that actually comparing prices, I was looking at Latvia. So in Latvia, the first 6 months, prices have doubled compared with last year. Yes. But it doesn't make any sense to compare them because last year was an anomaly. So it makes sense to compare them to the year before, 2019. And there's also been about a 20% increase in prices in the first 6 months, particularly, and we can come back to that in June and July. And what we see is a lot of that is driven by the CO2 price. If CO2 price had stayed the same, then we would have very, very similar prices. But there are also other things. I already mentioned that June and July has seen record high prices across the region. It's been because, fuel prices, gas and coal prices are very high. CO2 prices are very high. Hydro generation in Scandinavia has been limited, which has also kind of meant that a lot of Scandinavian hydro has been used up a lot. And we also had, as is quite common, relatively windless June and July. So there wasn't a lot of wind power available. And so it's kind of been a perfect storm. And I think there's a bit of a risk that we might see something similar happening in the winter as well. But the main thing for electric vehicle owners is this: while the average price has moved, what we see is there's a clear trend that peak prices, so 9 a.m. in the morning, 6 p.m. in the evening, when everybody's using a lot of electricity, have risen a lot more. And off-peak prices, where there's more renewable shares and there's less CO2 intensity, have actually stayed stable or even come down. And so basically, it makes even more sense to not consume when you come home or charge when you come home, but actually charge in the middle of the night if you are on an electricity price contract that enables you to do so.
Yes, that's what I understood before I even switched my contract or considered it, was that I know that in the off-peak, it's not unusual to see actually negative prices. But in the peak time, you can see it like what? It's like it's not comparing to anything. It's really a peak.
And it's really useful, Carlos, to also kind of, again, maybe just to for some of the listeners to go through the basics of how the electricity price is set, right? So the electricity price is always set by the most expensive plants. So if we have 99 power stations in the market that costs, I don't know, 10 euros per megawatt hour to generate. But if we have electricity demand for 100, not 99, and the 100th one is a really, really expensive plant that has to be turned on to meet that demand, then that final plant is the one that sets the price. And in our market, the ones that are these expensive plants that come online at 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. in the evening usually are the dirtier fossil heavy plants. that also have to pay a very high CO2 price. So if the CO2 price has gone from 20 euros to 50 euros, then you can basically add that same 50 euros to the electricity price, and that really pushes it higher. And we feel that the peak prices will only continue to go up, but then the off peak, where we have more renewables, are likely to come down. So even last weekend on Saturday, we had almost zero prices. Denmark had negative prices. That's because we had a lot of wind generation. None of the fossil plants were really generating. But if you look at last night, we had very high prices because there was no wind available.
Yeah, I actually did not think of it in such a way that the peakers, their prices are up just because they're gas powered usually.
Yeah, exactly. And gas prices are very high. So and basically it's the way of the market to tell us, do not consume during peak hours, please consume when there's more renewable. And that's what the CO2 price also does, right? As part of it. And it's kind of a, unfortunately, it's the invisible hand trying to push consumption to the night. And but unfortunately, still not a lot of people are on these variable price contracts, so they can't benefit from it. And we as Gridio then want to be one of the fingers of the invisible hand to help charging move automatically to the off-peak hours. And again, we ran a quick calculation. So we looked at an electric vehicle that drives somewhere around 25,000 kilometers per year, which is a reasonable average. That in Latvia, in the first kind of 6 months, the driver would have saved somewhere around 70 to 80 euros in the 6 months, so about 150 to 160 per year, if they not plugged in at 8 p.m. but actually had used the cheap prices overnight. And we then want to kind of help automate that process.
Well, that's really helpful to have it. Let's now talk about the Gridio itself. As I read in the internet, you're currently working with Teslas. Other manufacturers are still in the pipeline. Tell us the principle of how it works.
So the main goal, what we do is making kind of smart charging easy. And so there's kind of, I'd say, two types of people. Some people who just come home in the evening at 6 p.m., plug it in. The electricity price can be 100 euros per megawatt hour or 10 cents per kilowatt hour. And they start charging it during the peak times. And they actually contribute to high CO2 and high prices. What we do is, if you sign up to Gridio, you download the app. Currently for Teslas, but as you said, we're adding more brands. And then you download the app, you connect your electric vehicle account, such as your Tesla account, using their open APIs. And so we use their kind of official authentication methods. And the next thing you say is that, Gridio, I want my car to be charged up by 7 a.m. in the morning. And then the next time you plug in the evening, we will say, oh, I see, Carlis, that your Tesla needs 4 hours of charging before 7 a.m. to get to the full charge. And we will automatically pick the cheapest hours to do so. So for example, we might charge your car for 2 hours from midnight to 2, and then from 2 hours from 5 to 6. And then help you automatically, not having to schedule it yourself and not having to worry about yourself. Then we do that for you through our app.
And let me be clear, because I got confused in the website that you could pick between the greenest or the cheapest. For now, I thought it's the same, basically.
It's a bit of an interesting one. So, for example, in some markets, there's very good data about the CO2 intensity. Like Finland, for example, has very good hourly data, so you can also optimize for the CO2 level if you wanted to, that we're currently testing. But basically, in our markets, we did some analysis, and normally it's also cleaner in the middle of the night than it is in the evening. But sometimes you can get these weird situations where we for example, import electricity from Russia all of a sudden, and it increases the CO2 intensity as well. So it can also be a bit higher. But generally, what we say to our users is that it might not be that every night you reduce your CO2 footprint, but if you every day that you don't charge in peak times and charge at off-peak times, then you will reduce your carbon footprint as well. And how much you reduce depends on your electricity mix. So in the Baltics, you can, in the case of Estonia, we're somewhere around 30 to 40% lower carbon intensity. For example, in Finland and Sweden, where there's a lot of nuclear and hydro, the impact is a bit smaller. But the main thing is that we kind of charge when it makes sense, when usually the lowest price means more renewables, means less CO2.
You mentioned Estonia, Finland, Latvia, and you said that you work with Swedish as well, Lithuania, I assume, Norway. So basically the whole North Pole, right?
Correct.
And as I understood, you've done some analysis. And what can you say, like, how's the electricity market looking? Well, not, you said the EVs were lagging, but how's the electricity market for Baltics looking?
Look, so you can also go and, I guess, read more about this on our website and our blog, so Gridio Medium. But I think the one thing, if you look at the Baltics, all Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, then our market is very clearly described that we have dirtier fossil fuel plants. We know Estonia has shale oil, you guys have some coal, some gas, but also luckily some hydro. And we do see instances when electricity prices can get very high. And one of the big things helping against that is importing cleaner electricity from Finland, Scandinavia, through Lithuania. But most of the time, the cables between the countries are basically full. So if there is excess clean energy in Scandinavia that we can import to the Baltics, then actually our prices are pretty low as well. Yes. But as soon as there's peak demand, then the cables run out of capacity, and that's also where our prices increase. But that's clearly changing. We've all seen across the Baltics now the negative electricity prices. In March this year, we had negative electricity prices, which was even 2 years ago people maybe would have laughed at that. But we're now entering also in the Baltics with so much wind development happening and more offshore wind coming. We're entering an electricity market area of some abundance. There's sometimes too much green electricity, and therefore it makes sense to consume it based on the price targets. But until we can completely decarbonize our electricity sector, these high carbon prices that I was telling you about in the beginning, yes, they will keep penalizing us at the peak hours.
So it would be smart for a household actually to have this, well, the main consumer switch to price tariff kind of working mechanism. You mentioned that, yes, we can charge our Tesla with it, our Trojan horse with it. And then we move on to the next bigger one, which is our actually heat pumps.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess it depends on, and sorry, I don't know the housing stock of Latvia so well, but there's basically the larger consumers tend to be electric car, electric boiler for water heating sometimes, electric heating and underfloor heating, and then also heat pumps. And so those are the ones, and looking like Gridio's vision is that at some point we want to add more of those devices there as well. But what we've also, I guess, discovered a bit in our customer journeys in Scandinavia is that people care a lot more about how they charge a car than what does an electric boiler in a basement do.
Well, it's not emotional, but the car is emotional.
Exactly. But in the end, it's we even have our a product for electric boilers available that does the same thing. And what we kind of tell users is that it always, in the long term, will make sense to move to a variable price contract, because there's a lot of companies that offer the fixed price contract, but that fixed part always comes at a premium, right? And that's the insurance that gets charged on top. And so, for example, if you'd switched over to a variable price contract, in the beginning of the year, then in June and July this year, you would have struggled a bit. You would have paid a bit more if you hadn't been able to have, for example, Gridio for your electric vehicle. But over time, the variable price contract will always be cheaper than the fixed price contract because the insurance of being fixed costs money.
Actually, I can comment on this one because I recently switched in my countryside from a fixed contract to this variable contract, and the reason I did was because they changed our pricing for the fixed contract. Till now, it was like, okay, I could earn maybe €1 or 2 in a year. Why would I bother? Then now they changed, like, okay, now you're gonna pay almost 10 cents per kilowatt hour in our fixed. And I'm like, no way.
Whoa, yeah.
Yeah, and then I switched to the market thing, and the last month, July, it was the most expensive electricity we've seen so far, and it was still cheaper than the price offered.
Wow. There you go. Because in the end, the electricity companies, they will still buy the electricity from the market. So at some point, they will pay that market price over the long run anyway. Yes. And if you're smart about the consumption, an electric vehicle, if you charge it at home, that's somewhere around 4,000 kilowatt hours. If you're smart about it, you can move a big chunk of your electricity consumption to cheaper hours. So what we see is that I think in the month of July, the average price that our users would have had was, I think, 9 cents per kilowatt hour. And we brought it down to somewhere around 6 cents per kilowatt hour in Estonia and Finland, just by smart charging.
Like 30% off, bam.
Exactly. And you can go and then start collecting money maybe for the Tesla full self-driving mode or something, basically.
Exactly. Saving money for, I don't know, Tesla stocks or whatnot.
Yeah, that's right.
That's great news. And just a simple app. You go in, log in, give access to Tesla's app, and done deal.
Yeah, you log in. It takes, if you have really fast fingers, you can do it in probably 30 seconds. But you log in, you create your account. We keep all the Tesla authentication is done through the Tesla portal, so we don't see any of the usernames and passwords and don't store it. We ask the user, hey, what time do you want your car to be ready by? What time do you normally come home? And where is your home charging happening? So for example, if you happen to go to the cinema or a shopping mall in the evening, then Gridio doesn't touch the charging, because in fast chargers, you want to charge really quickly. But it's the home location where we really kind of help, using the vehicle's kind of GPS system, that we don't track where you drive during the day. We only check when you come home whether the GPS matches what you told us is your home location. And our users, on average, they are saving around kind of 30% on every charging session by doing it. And at the moment, we are handing out the app for free. We have somewhere around 50 to 60 Tesla users already, which in the Baltics is actually pretty good, and gathering pace in Finland and Sweden. Based on the user feedback, we want to kind of help to understand and improve the app so that everything makes sense to everybody. And then over time, our long-term vision is that if we can basically make charging free by moving the capacity of charging around so that the grids get saved and then more renewables gets consumed, and then also the customer feels part of the energy transition journey. So that is kind of our goal that we're doing. So we're really inviting people to try it out.
So great. So if someone owns a Tesla or knows someone who owns a Tesla, then get the Gridio app and save like 30%. And then you're good to go. And what about if I want to charge now? There's an option for it, right?
That's right. So if you come home at 4 p.m. and then the Gridio starts optimizing and says, hey, you should charge at 2 a.m. in the night. But if at 8 p.m. in the evening you discover that all of a sudden you had to drive to another city, then you can quickly open the app and press that stop smart charging for the next 24 hours. and then we will kind of stop adjusting your charging. It can charge the full, and the next 24 hours it will re-engage as well.
Awesome. And what about those guys that own solar?
So we're currently working with testing some solar integrations. The main, a lot of people, I guess, who have especially Teslas have solar panels on the roofs as well. And one of the quite annoying things can be if you have so much sun that your house can't consume it and you otherwise export it, which doesn't make economic sense, then people also have to manually turn on their Tesla charging. We also want to help with that. So currently we have started working integrating Fronius solar inverters, but as the other inverters also open up their APIs, then we plan to also release a solar charging feature, probably more in time for the next sunny season. We're probably going to be just testing it. And the idea there is that, if you are at home, your roof is generating solar that your house can't consume, then automatically we will also turn on the charging, so you don't have to worry about it. And that helps you also to, I guess, increase the payback of your solar panels, but also reduce the charging cost of your car. So even if for some reason prices are really expensive in the market, but you have extra sun, then you should always use that sun, right?
Of course. And currently it's Tesla owners, later on others with an API. What if I own a really old EV that doesn't have an app? Is there a solution from you guys?
Yeah, so actually what we are also working and we're working with some energy companies to also bring to a market a solution that works through the charger. If you have a really old electric vehicle, but you can still buy a charger that has an internet connection and connect that to smart charging. It's also possible to do, and then it's more about making sure that we know how much charging your vehicle needs. But generally, the trend that we see is that most vehicles are increasingly opening up their APIs. Which enables to offer this kind of smart charging service. But for those who either don't want to connect their car or, for example, their car API is not that great. So, for example, with the older Nissan Leafs, we have been testing the solution with the Leafs as well. But anytime we make any adjustments, you have to log back into your Nissan app, which is really annoying. So for example, all the Leaf owners doing it via the charger makes more sense, and the system is the same. What time do you have to have your car ready by in the morning? How much charging do you need? And we will allocate it automatically to the cheapest hours.
Well, sounds great. It's a perfect solution for EV owners that actually do care about both environment and their wallet.
Absolutely, you couldn't have said it better.
Well, and you have a Facebook page. Do you have an Instagram page?
Currently we have Facebook, Twitter, Medium, LinkedIn, but we're moving to the Instagram page as well. So
okay,
but the best place is to follow us on Facebook, and we keep all our communication in English there anyway, so everybody can follow it.
Great. So basically, go to the Facebook, find Gridio, follow them, like them, message them, annoy them, whatever.
Yes, please tell us as much feedback as you want. Tell us all your wishes, and we make sure that they can come true over time. Okay.
Anything else you want to add, Konrad?
No, I think, look, thank you so much, Carlis, for having us on the podcast. It's, I guess, great to get a chance to speak to Latvian EV owners, and we look forward to maybe attending your podcast more often and talking about how it's going with smart charging.
Oh, one last question. What's your Trojan horse?
What's our Trojan horse? Look, I think
I mean yours, Konrad. You said the EVs are Trojan horses. What is yours?
You mean what do I install in people's homes, or
no,
what do you mean by that?
I mean, what's your daily driver?
Oh, what's my daily driver? Actually, I don't own a car. I'm from that generation that
cool.
I go and rent the Teslas from the apps that are available here. But actually, the rest of our team members own Teslas and Audis, so we have a lot of Tesla and EV competency in the team as well. So nothing to worry about there.
Awesome. Then I congratulate you on launching Gridio app and waiting for some Latvian feedbacks. And I hope that my podcast can help you spread further in Latvia. Thank you, Konrad. And people,
thank you so much.
Go search again the Gridio app.